one of the first things that I think kind of started to open my eyes, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the first one to mention it here, but I was introduced to Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and there was a little bit of a mental shift, or there something was planted in my brain at that time about exchanging time for money, and I realized that the profession I had chosen dictated that in order for me to make money, I needed to put in time. It was very difficult to scale my profession in the firm. Maybe if I started my own firm, but that really didn't appeal to me. But it became very clear that in order for me to generate money, I needed to spend more time.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. So what's it take to get started? It's just that, just getting started. Today, we're going to have a conversation about what that means. And the asset class today is land. Yeah, land, buying and investing in raw land. Today's guest is a land investor and part of the LandGeek community. Today, he'll share his journey in the world of buying and selling raw land as an investment. We talk about how he got started, how he overcome the challenge of not being experienced in marketing, building a business, talking to sellers. What does that look like? Well, he's actually an attorney, a real estate attorney. So that helped him bridge the gap just a little bit when it came to being comfortable with the contracts. His first deal is a doozy. We talk about it. And today he's investing in land. He's been doing it for over 5 years. And he's completed over 200 transactions. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Mr. Roberto Chavez. Roberto, what's up, man? How is it going today?
It's going great, Brett. Thank you.
Awesome. And just before we came on, there was something just buzzed your house. What was that, man?
I believe it was a military helicopter close to a military base here. So
that's awesome.
We get that a lot.
Well, that's so cool. And I just wanted to bring that up, to take the moment to say thank you to all the service men, women, and family that devote so much and give so much of their life so that we can do what we do. And that is real estate. Isn't that right, Roberto?
That's right. No, and I want to second that sentiment. Absolutely. And yeah, we get an opportunity to do what we love and find our passion and do things that not only generate wealth, but we have fun along the way. So it's great.
Yeah. It's that interesting spot where, and I've said this so many times, I really need to learn what it's like. There were ways that people use like wires or sticks or whatever, and they're holding them out in front of them, and they hold them out straight. And then when they got over a water source, those things were supposed to cross. So I don't know if it's like an old way of finding water or whatever it is, but I think it's a great illustration of what it's like when you can link passion with income. When those two sticks cross, oh, it's beautiful. It's like you never work a day in your life when you can link passion and income together. And especially when you're very passionate about something and it pays you very well. And that little thing that pays you very well today is this little thing that we all have under our feet, except for that person that was just buzzed you by in that helicopter. The land, right? You're a land investor. Roberto, why don't you take a little time here and tell the listeners just a little bit about your professional background? Let's start there. What's your professional background?
So my professional background is an attorney. I did my 4 years of undergrad economics and then went off to law school, 3 years in Austin. Great experience, great city, loved it. And I worked at a law firm for close to 8 years, more or less. I did real estate law and corporate law on the transactional side, not on the litigation side. So that was great experience. It was really nice, but I think the law firm lifestyle was just not what I was looking for. It didn't fulfill me. So I started to look for other things that I think we're gonna talk about.
Interesting. And when you say transactional, that to me it sounds like acquisition and disposition, acquisition and sales for on the commercial side. So commercial properties. Does that sound right?
Yes, when I say transactional, I also mean to differentiate it from litigation. So I wouldn't, if there were issues or problems, there were other attorneys at the firm that would actually file lawsuits or defend lawsuits. I was more on the disposition, acquiring, changing of ownership, transfer of ownership, all of that, like the paperwork that goes behind things, and negotiating many times purchase contracts of commercial properties or of businesses themselves. So it was, it's kind of the behind the scenes of the changing of ownership in businesses or real estate. Interesting.
And the practice, the office kind of thing you said didn't fit your fancy there. What was it in particular, I guess, that kind of drove you away from something that you'd worked so hard to, or worked so hard towards?
Yeah. It was a combination of things. One of the first things that I think kind of started to open my eyes, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the first one to mention it here, but I was introduced to Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and there was a little bit of a mental shift, or there something was planted in my brain at that time about exchanging time for money. And I realized that the profession I had chosen dictated that in order for me to make money, I needed to put in time. It was very difficult to scale my profession in the firm. Maybe if I started my own firm, but that really didn't appeal to me. But it became very clear that in order for me to generate money, I needed to spend more time. And being locked in that path really scared me. And the other thing is I respect and admire the attorneys that worked at the firm, but I also really didn't envy their lifestyle at 50 or 60, where they were working long hours, weekends. It wasn't something that I really was looking forward to. So a combination of those things led me to start just seeing what was out there. If there was anything, hopefully it wasn't too late for me to try to change career paths or supplement it, or find something that allowed me to kind of get out of that time for money and spend time and invest time in something that could potentially grow and not need my time all the time.
So what do you do now?
So as I was going through that path, I was listening to podcasts such as yours, just trying to learn more about real estate. And I honestly can't remember which podcast it was. This was back in 2018. I hear Mark Podolsky, the LandGeek, talking about the land investing model. And I heard kind of a 5-minute pitch about how he goes out there, buys raw land, turns around, sells it on terms, and gets mailbox money every month for X amount of years on those properties. And to be honest with you, I mean, I was a real estate lawyer and I was helping people run their businesses, but I had never heard of this business model. And when I heard it the first time, it made a lot of sense. I mean, I didn't know that there were people buying and selling raw land out in the middle of nowhere many times. But the transactional side of things, the way it worked really, really made sense. And I thought it was something that I could explore.
And what interesting piece. So as an attorney, was there anything about this? You said you didn't know that business model. Like, what were the first flags that popped up in your mind? I have a friend who is an attorney, and sometimes it's just dreadful speaking with him because it is like this thing that your brain sets is, okay, where are the problems at? And then the flags pop up, right? So for you and your professional experience, like, what were some of the things that end up turning out to be, nothing to worry, nothing to raise a flag about. Just maybe you didn't know the particular part of this business approach.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I hadn't thought about it that way, but in reality, I feel like my legal background gave me a sense of security, or not security, but confidence about like getting a contract with the seller, getting a deed from the seller. I'd prepared hundreds of deeds at that point, recording the deed with the county, selling the property, drafting the purchase contract. All of that I felt comfortable with, and it didn't intimidate me. What was much more intimidating for me was the marketing side of things, the sales side of things, talking to sellers, talking to buyers. How do I approach that? The business management of things, the organization of running a business, and hiring virtual assistants and having systems in place. All that was foreign to me, and that, having been in this legal world, I felt pretty comfortable with all of the legal aspects of it. Once I researched it, I mean, there were things that I did question, like can you do owner finance and all that, but I could research all of those things and I could get comfortable with them. It was really the running a business, which I had never done, that kind of intimidated me and really made me think about what I needed to do to make it work, which was eventually several years of coaching and training that I went through.
And that was through the LandGeek specifically, correct?
That's correct. Yes, it was. I did back in the. It's not exactly the same today, but when I heard Mark on the podcast, I went online and he had a toolkit that you could purchase, and I just kind of pulled the trigger. I remember I was with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and I told her I ordered this thing about buying and selling raw land. I spent a couple $100 on it, and I don't know if it's going to work or not. And then that led me to then jumping on a call with Mark and talking about the other programs that he had. And I just kind of, as I was going more into it, I realized, okay, I'm seeing results, but I need help building systems and really shaping this into a business, not just a side gig. And then that's how I ended up being within the community as a student of the program for close to 3 years.
And tell us a little bit about that transition for you. What did the first deal look like?
The first land deal, right?
Yes, sir.
So the first land deal was, I don't think I've had as good a deal as I did with that one, and that just comes to prove that I think there were higher powers working in my favor to tell me this was a path that I needed to take. But basically, the model is you send out letters to property owners with an offer. After you do your research and your due diligence, some due diligence, you make an offer on the property, and you send hundreds or maybe thousands of letters a month, and you let them know, look, I'm willing to offer $500, $1,000, $2,000, whatever the case may be, for your piece of property. And so in that first batch of maybe 500, 600 letters, I got a letter back, no name, no email address, no phone number. It was just a guy signing the offer letter saying, I'm willing to sell you my property for $500. And I was like, wow, I was like, what? It ended up being 2 lots that he had, and he wanted $500 for each. But wow. I didn't have a phone number. I didn't have an email. So this was all snail mail.
Snail mail.
Yeah. So at that point, I was like, okay. I didn't do a lot of due diligence on the property. So I was just excited that I had somebody who had responded. And so what I did is I drafted up a letter saying, thank you for your response. Attached is a deed. Please sign it in front of a notary. Once we get the deed back, I'll send you your check for $1,000 summed up. I put it in the mail. I'm like, this guy's never, best case scenario, he calls me and tells me like, hey, what's going on? A week, 2 weeks later, I get a letter back. It's the deed signed, notarized, saying, here's a deed. Please send money. Please send check to the same address. I was like, oh my God. So I go and record the deed, gets recorded. I send the guy the money. I'm like, great. I have 2 properties now. What do I do with them? I then start doing a little bit more of due diligence, and I come to find out that there were $3,000 in back taxes on each of these properties. I'm like, no, I just got myself into this $6,000 debt that made no sense. So I started making some phone calls to not land investors, but just people in my circle that I knew that might be interested in this property. And I reach this guy, and I tell him the property ID. I give him the Google Maps location. I tell him where it is, and he offers me $10,000 for each one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, and I told him there's back taxes. He's like, that's okay. I'll take care of the back taxes. Let's just get it done. We go through a title company. We close. I get a $20,000 check. I'm like, what did just happen? Like I spent $1,000. It turned into this. Like I said, it's not like every deal this happens. But it was just proof of concept. I realized that even though I had made a mistake on the property taxes, it ended up working out. And so for me, and it gave me the funds necessary, because I didn't have a lot of funds, but like that deal gave me the funds necessary to really kickstart the business, start mailing more, being able to get more properties in inventory, pay for some of the coaching. So it was just like a perfect deal to get started with, proving that the model works. And like that was just the beginning. And from there on, I just kept going.
There's so much to unpack there. I could talk for 2 hours just on that deal alone. First one is, how did you pick an area? Like, what area did you pick, or tell us a little bit about that selection for you.
Yeah. So the best way when you're getting started to pick an area is there's a handful of websites that you could go and see where other land investors are buying and selling raw land. Well, really where they're selling land retail. So there's Landmodo, Landwatch, Land Century, Lands.com, Farms of America, or Lands and Farms. There's a lot there. Land Flip. And you kind of see where there's movement. And based on the movement, then you go into that county and you do your county research, which is figuring out how friendly their website is. Can you do recordings electronically? Can you is their GIS map the map to like the equivalent of like a Google Earth map, but for the specific county? Is it user friendly? You kind of start trying to figure out all of those things. And then based on the movement that there is from other land investors, you send out offer letters and you try to find deals that way, saying, okay, if there's land investors selling land in that area for $10,000, let's try to pick it up for anywhere from $2,000 to maybe $4,000 max. That way there's a nice cushion there for me. And it's just a matter of sending letters. Once you send those letters out, it's really then that you're going to know what the market is. The market will speak to you. So if you hear crickets, it means you underpriced, and maybe you need to make an offer letter a little bit higher. If you get a lot of response, and in our industry, I consider more than 5% response a lot of response, then it might mean that you're overpricing your offers. And so that's the way you play around with it. And that's the way I kind of decided to start going into my first county based on that. And it was just a matter of sending letters. That one, I think I did get a little lucky with that gentleman that just wanted, I think, and in hindsight, he just wanted to not pay the back taxes. He didn't really know what the value of his property was.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of how you go about picking a county.
Interesting. And on the transaction side of it, do you ever wholesale these things, or do you always close and then disposition it?
So you mean like double closing?
Yeah. So a wholesale would be once I have it in contract to purchase, then I can assign that contract. Some places you can't do that everywhere anymore. But it sounds like, and I've got more questions on that first deal, which none of this would even have happened in. But so there was no purchase agreement. It was an almost sound like a letter of intent as opposed to a purchase agreement.
When I purchased it, it's an offer letter, and like I said back in that day, I was signing the offer letter, so it's a pseudo purchase contract, but it
Okay.
had the terms. It said that I was signing it, but then it also says that if there's things in due diligence that I find that I don't like, then I don't have to. The offer is no longer valid. But
Right.
But that offer, I mean, I at that point I really didn't do a lot of research. But he signed it back, so I had a piece of paper, a written contract that said that I was willing to pay $500 for the property, and the seller signed it saying he was accepting the $500 for that property.
Interesting. So you're double closing in regard. I mean, some of these you're probably just closing on finding the seller and then doing like a seller finance piece, I'm sure, on some of these as well. This first deal, why in the world would somebody sign a deed that you sent them?
That was a question I had at the beginning too. As
So
an attorney, especially as an attorney, I was like, I would never advise a client to sign a deed.
So for the listeners out there who doesn't maybe not have that transactional experience, you're basically giving them the keys to your house without even getting any payment or any guarantee of payment or anything like that. So when that deed goes, there goes the equitable interest in the property. I mean, that's all you have. That's basically, it's gone at that point.
Yeah, and you could argue that on his end, he was giving away a total of $6,000 liability, so he didn't really care.
Right.
Like
True.
He's like, okay, well, if you'll assume it, by all means, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But even then, like every week, I mean, I buy properties. We talk. I have an intake manager now who helps and talks to the sellers and talks to them through the process. And there's basically two ways we close. There's actually three ways that we buy land. We either do that way a direct closing, which is we send them the deed. They send us the deed back. There's a purchase contract that's signed that says once we get the deed, it gets recorded, we'll send you the funds. And that there is trust on their part on us to fulfill that part of the agreement. But we do have a signed contract that if we don't pay them, they could sue us if they wanted to. Then we have a mobile notary, which is a remote closing, whereby we send a notary in the seller's area all of the paperwork, a cashier's check. They meet up with the seller. The seller signs the deed, signs the contract, signs everything. The mobile notary gives them their check, and then the mobile notary sends us a copy by email and then emails a hard copy to us. That gives the seller a little bit more security that they're not just sending the deed out without getting paid first. And then the final one, and that's usually done on bigger deals, is we close via title company, and the title company basically takes care of everything.
Yep, title or attorney, depending on what states you're in. Yep. That makes sense to me. And the idea of, I mean, even when you're the contractual agreement, and as an attorney, you could probably appreciate that. It's just all about really the person on the other side, what they're, air quotes, what they're worth, what you're willing to spend to chase down something. So the idea of chasing down $500, he was probably good just signing off his liability of $3,000 times 2. He's like, okay, I'm paid, right?
Yeah.
So, the idea of throwing good money after bad money when it comes down to it. But this is very interesting, the way, and we could talk for hours and hours about all of this stuff. the marketing piece. So some of those things you mentioned first that you were uneasy with, or maybe just the unknown, the marketing, the business management, the setup, the follow-up, talking to sellers. What have been your biggest takeaways in the last, say in the last year on those things in particular?
It's much more daunting looking at it from the outside than when you're actually kind of get your feet wet and start doing the marketing and trying to organize things. There's definitely tools out there that I didn't know about that exist that make things a lot easier. I think before the call, you heard me mention Airtable, and we use Follow Up Boss for CRM. There's a lot of tools that help make things a little bit smoother than they would otherwise, especially for someone that was never trained in marketing or talking to potential buyers and explaining the characteristics of the property, the location, if there's services, if there's not, and understanding that buyer mindset that there's some people that we call them in our industry, we call them avatars, and it's who is your avatar? Who are you talking to? Are you talking to the person that wants to buy land because they want it as an investment for the future, or you're talking to the person who wants to go out there and ride motorcycles and kind of do outdoor stuff? Like, who is it that you're talking to? And that entails how you approach that conversation, and those are things that I basically learned on the run. I mean, as I was doing this, I didn't have any training, educational at school or anything like that. So it's been really fun learning all of those things that come into play when it comes to the marketing side of the business.
Yeah, and that's the marketing, I guess, avenue where you're talking about avatar. That's just marketing in general, the avatar, who we're reaching out to, who we're talking to. So since then, you talk about education. You have actually joined the LandGeek, and you are helping educate others in this process now, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I'm part of the LandGeek coaching program. Well, I was a student of the LandGeek coaching program. Now I'm a coach in the LandGeek program. And so that's right. We there's a lot of people in our community, and now I'm on the other side, kind of talking to people who are at the beginning of their journey, the way I was back in 2018, and helping them, whether it's at the very initial stage of their business or they've already gone through some of the educational aspects of it, or they just need a phone call to talk about recording a deed or what system to implement or who to hire next in their business, whether it's somebody with the intake or a sales manager, whatever the case may be. I've been fortunate enough to learn a lot through the LandGeek program that I'm now able to pass on some of that knowledge to people who are just starting their land investing journey.
I'm paraphrasing Jim Rohn, which I will continue to say this. Jim Rohn should be a high school, or should be a class in high school. Everybody should have to learn from him. But anyway, the idea of when you're teaching, you're actually learning. So that's so cool. And I feel that so much, even when I'm one of those soapbox guys. Sometimes when I get the opportunity to say, "Hey, try this, do this, try it," like I'm offering information when people aren't even asking for it. So that's to my downfall. I try to share as much as possible. But what are some of the most, I guess, what's the most common question that you see from your students now, being a teacher?
I think the underlying concern, and it might not always be posed as a question, but how long is it going to take me to see success in this business? Like, I feel like that's always there. How much money is it going to cost me to really see this business grow? Yeah. And really, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't mean to sound cliche or anything like that, but it boils down to how strong is your why, as to why are you doing this business? Is it just as as a side gig, just trying to check it out, see if it's something that works, and you're not fully vested in it, then I would say it's probably going to take a little longer. Or
Mm-hmm.
do you have the blinds on and you're just focused on this and you're not looking at other things, and you may have a 9 to 5 job or whatever, but all other hours of the day you're thinking about buying and selling land, then I think you're going to see results a lot sooner. But I feel, and it's a fair question. I mean, I remember there's LandGeek has boot camps, and I went up to Mark, who runs LandGeek, and I told him, like, hey Mark, like, when am I going to have $5,000 in passive income? And that was basically his answer. It was like, well, I mean, if you really sit down and just focus on this, you could do it in 6 months, 7 months. I mean, it's doable, but it comes down to how strong is your why, and how many hours are you going to put into it, especially at the beginning when it's a brand new thing and when it requires the most amount of time.
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake, the most common mistake that you see with students?
So I feel like when people join a coaching community, they think that everything is going to be handed out in a silver platter, and it's kind of it's not a fund where you just invest money and the fund does its work. There's a lot of work that has to be put in from yourself. A coach, our job is to coach you and help you move along the way, but you're the one who has to make the sales calls. You're the one who has to make the conversations with the seller, and it's a lot of work, and I think it's a business that you're starting. It's not a side gig, and I feel sometimes people underestimate how much time and effort it takes to start building a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the investor mindset is always, how much is it going to cost, and when am I going to get my money back?
Yeah.
That piece. And this is active real estate investing. There's no easy button. And even when you mentioned the fund or a syndication or something like that, you've got to put in work before it, because nobody's going to care more about your money than you do. There is no easy button. You can't just hit when you hit. I mean, there may be some resources now that are available where you can hit print and it prints the offer and then prints the documents and all this, but it's not going to print money. You actually have to put work into it to print money. But you get it right, Roberto. It does print money. That first time that you got, $10,000 for both of those properties, that's real. That's real.
Yeah.
And in wholesaling, I mean, there were times when the first time I got a $10,000 wholesale contract, now I didn't have to buy it. I didn't have to fix it. I'm done. I'm down. Sign me up. And then you do one for $100,000. It's like, what? Why didn't I learn this stuff in school? But the thing is, I always say that too about passive piece too, a long-term investing when it comes to real estate, whether it's land or houses or whatever, storage, multifamily, parks. There's so much that goes into it. It's out there, and we may have bumped into it, but I don't think I was ready at that time. Like, I get upset because I didn't learn it earlier. Maybe I had the signs, or I had the chance, I had the opportunity. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. But when your time is coming, when your time is here and it's ready for you, it'll find you. It'll find you by slapping you in the face with a deal like that, right? That's how you got started.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where there was a combination of my legal preparation, I feel, gave me, maybe between maturity and knowledge, got me ready to the point that when I was introduced to land investing, it was a perfect time. Because maybe if I would have been introduced to land investing when I was in college or something, it might have just kind of flown by me, and I wouldn't have never taken the opportunity and never gone back to it, because I had already seen it and it didn't seem like a right fit for me. But it was the perfect time for me. And again, there was a little bit of luck in terms of the deal that I was presented with that made it something that I just had to continue doing.
Yeah. So if Jim Rohn was actually something you studied in high school, and Rich Dad Poor Dad was a required reading in high school, and like there's so many things that you could change and shift in, but now our children are, I mean, they're growing up with this, and the speed of information is insane. YouTube, podcasts, like it's all out there. So then the only tuition really that it's going to take anymore is let's see, what is it, going out there and taking action. Like that's the tuition. Go take action.
Time
then
to try to learn these things.
Initiative and action. That's what I was searching for. Initiative and action. And that can be done on LandGeek. We are going to actually have Mark on the show here in the near future to talk more about LandGeek. But the listeners can go to landgeek.com, thelandgeek.com, TheLandGeek.com to connect with you. And learn more about LandGeek. So cool. And as you build out these places, and I mean, he's been doing this from like 09 or 11 or something like that himself. So it's been a long time. He's able to invest a lot into this, a lot of resources there. Last question I have for you, Roberto, is if you could go back 10 years and you are set beside somebody that was in the similar path as you, whether it's in law school or prior to that, kind of just getting started in the path, but you have the knowledge that you have now, what would you say to that person that was on the similar path as you?
Start now. I mean, start right there and then to educate yourself on other forms of creating income. I mean, unless it's something that you're already on a path where, like we talked at the beginning, it's your passion and you're generating income. Even then, I think it's a disservice to yourself to not try and learn about other forms of generating income, whether it's for yourself or your family, but take action right there and then to learn about whether it's land investing or syndications or anything that will help you generate another source of income, so that at the end of the day, that gives you more freedom, more time to do with your time as you please. And I mean, I think we live in a country and in a society that gives us the resources and the tools to be able to do that. And you don't get that everywhere in the world. And I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves by not pursuing something else.
Initiative and action, and it all happens when you start. And it's great advice is to start now, because just imagine if you had started 2 years ago, where'd you be now? If you started 5 years ago, where'd you be now? And it's the old plant a tree. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and today. So take action, start today. That's absolutely beautiful. And continue to share the knowledge is massive. Having an abundance mindset is beautiful. The more that you can share, the more that the world will just bring back to you. So just expanding your associations, getting out there, sharing that, because there is a way to close this gap between where we were and where we are now, and giving others that same opportunity to close that gap, get there sooner. And it's all done by starting today. What a better thing to say.
Exactly. No, we try to accelerate that. It was accelerated for me through the program, from getting from point A to where I am now. It probably would have taken me several more years to be able to do it. And there's nothing like shortening that period of where you are to where you want to be. And that's what coaching and resources and reading and informing yourself, that's what it helps to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time today, Roberto. Really appreciate it. And for the listeners out there today, it is thelandgeek.com to find out more about what they have to offer, from education to resources. But for the biggest piece of it is just taking action. Land is a piece in this puzzle. Land has something to do with all the real estate we take in. This is the actual real hard asset, the dirt and the stones below us when we start. But from there are so many different options. Find the one where your two sticks cross. And that's that one where you can be passionate about. No, you may not be passionate about dirt, but you may be passionate about the process, building the team, overcoming the challenges, learning, studying, finding that little pocket where your niche fits, whether that's land, whether that's single family, short-term, long-term, multifamily, storage, mobile homes. Man, there's so much out there for you. And it all starts by expanding your associations. Don't be a lazy learner. Take action. Just like Roberto says, the time is now. Plant that tree today. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD.